So we're going to dive into a really powerful piece of American history today, one that often gets overlooked. It's all seen through the lens of Natasha Trethaway's amazing poem, Native Guard. And what's so fascinating here is that it's a story where the entire power dynamic of the Civil War gets turned on its head. It turns out the mightiest weapon isn't a rifle, it's a pen.
And Trethaway kicks things off with this quote from Frederick Douglass. It's not just a throwaway line, it's the anchor for the entire poem. I mean, think about that question. It frames everything we're about to talk about. What stories get told, who gets to tell them, and maybe even more importantly, what gets left out, what gets erased.
So, who exactly was this Native Guard? Well, we're talking about the Louisiana Native Guards, and they were one of the very first black regiments to fight for the Union during the Civil War. And let me tell you, their story is, well, it's complicated.
Yeah, take a look at their journey. It's wild. In the spring of 1861, these are free men in New Orleans, and they actually offer to fight for the Confederacy. I know, right? But then, just a year later, the Union takes the city, and the militia completely switches sides to fight for emancipation. This winding path eventually lands them, in January of 1863, on this remote little place called Ship Island, with a very, very unusual job.
And that job was this: guarding white Confederate prisoners. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Men who were either formerly enslaved themselves or had lived their entire lives under the shadow of slavery are now the jailers. They're guarding the very soldiers who are fighting to keep them in bondage. The world is literally turned upside down.
Okay, so how do we even begin to understand what that must have felt like? Well, this is where Trethaway's genius comes in. She doesn't just give us a history lecture. No, she takes us right inside the head of one of these soldiers through the pages of his own secret journal.
This is the collection we're talking about. And for Trethaway, this whole project is about correcting what she calls historic erasure. She's essentially building a monument with words for these soldiers who history completely forgot, who never got a monument made of stone. And the way she does it is by letting us hear directly from one of them.
And check this out. The poem's structure is a statement in itself. It's a crown of sonnets. Now, you don't need to be a poetry expert, but just know that this is a really complex classical form. It's the kind of thing usually reserved for epic, grand subjects. So for Trethaway to use this form for the journal of a 33-year-old former slave, wow! She's saying his story, his voice, belongs right up there with the greats. It's a huge deal.
So why is he writing? I mean, what's the point? Well, he tells us right here. He doesn't trust memory. He calls it flawed, changeful, and look at that line. Memory dulls the lash for the master, sharpens it for the slave. That's incredible. So for him, writing it down using ink, that makes it real. It makes it permanent. It's his way of fighting back, making sure his truth can't be twisted or forgotten.
All right, so let's zoom in on one specific entry. We're in February of 1863, and this is where you can really feel that incredible power shift happening on the island.
Okay, so remember how I mentioned this is a crown of sonnets? Here's where that structure gets really cool. The last line of one sonnet becomes the first line of the next one, so they're all linked. The previous poem ends with this line. On the surface, he's talking about tying down their tents during a storm, but it's about so much more than that. And boom, there it is. The very next poem starts with that same idea. Tying down what we will keep suddenly becomes the duty of keeping white men as prisoners. It's just a brilliant move, right? It connects this everyday physical act to their whole new, unbelievable reality.
And this line right here, this is the absolute core of the whole thing. Freedom has gotten them captivity. I mean, what a paradox. The Confederate prisoners, they were fighting for their version of freedom, a freedom that depended on owning other people. And in the end, it cost them their own. It's just incredible.
So let's just lay this all out. This is that inverted world in a nutshell. You've got the guard, a man formerly seen as property, who now has a weapon, is literate, and is the one controlling the story. Then you have the prisoner, a Confederate soldier, who is now the one being held captive, is illiterate, and has to depend on the guard. Everything has been flipped on its head.
But here's the thing. The real power shift here, it's not just about who has the gun. It's about something way more fundamental, something that goes a lot deeper.
It comes down to this simple, shocking fact. Many of the white Confederate prisoners can't read or write. So in this bizarre, topsy-turvy world, the black soldier is the one with the education, the one with the power of literacy, the very skill that was so often brutally denied to enslaved people.
So just try to picture that scene.
If a prisoner wants to write a letter home to his wife, to his kids, who does he have to ask for help? He has to go to the black soldier. He has to dictate his private, personal thoughts to a man he would have considered his property just weeks before, and he has no choice but to trust him.
And when the letter's all written out, what's their signature? This. Just an X.
That X says so much, doesn't it? It means the soldier is in complete control of the prisoner's words, their connection to their families. The prisoners have to sit there completely wary, hoping he's writing what they're actually saying. That X isn't just a signature, it's a symbol of their total dependence, their loss of control. It shows us that in this place, literacy has become a weapon more powerful than any gun.
And this one small, incredibly tense interaction, it's really a miniature version of what the entire poem is trying to do. Write a forgotten story back into the history books.
Get this, in the poem, the soldier is actually writing in a confiscated Confederate journal. He's literally writing his own words over the words of his enemy, creating what he calls a cross-hatching. It's this incredible metaphor for what's happening on a larger scale, writing a new history on top of the old one, forcing it to be seen.
And that really brings us full circle. The soldier writing in his journal, in the poem, is a mirror image of Natasha Trethaway writing the poem itself. They're both doing the exact same thing, building what she calls a metaphoric monument. They're creating the memorial that history refused to build for these men.
So we'll leave you with this question to think about. The poem really pushes us to see that power isn't just about guns and prison bars, right? It's about who gets to tell the story, who controls the narrative. And in the end, it really makes you think about all the ways a pen can be so much mightier than a sword.